This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere. Hi, this is Julie, and I'm here with Susan, and we are continuing with our discussion of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, part 3. We're moving through the book in many different ways, shapes, and forms, in no direction, which is fine. We're kind of in imagination. Imagination, as we've been reading through all the texts that we're conquering, is, like a great superpower to use with your conscious and to communicate to your subconscious. And there's a little excerpt in the imagination section that I wanted to read because I thought, this is interesting because we're talking about hard work. And then he says, if you are one of those who believe that hard work and honesty alone will bring riches, perish the thought. It is not true. Riches, when they come in huge quantities, are never the result of hard work alone. Riches come, if they come at all, in response to definite demands based upon the application of definite principles and not by chance or luck. And he's talking about transmuting the energy into specific cash. And it's funny because I think there's a lot of irony to that paragraph itself. And that, you have to do hard work, yet you also have to kind of relax into it. And you have to get into the space of the energy of, like we said, staying with your burning desire to get what you want to get. And to have the mindset that you need to understand that you're getting what you want to get. And if you're not, you're going full force and being persistent to get what you want to get.
Well, he talks about the imagination. The quote is the faculty of creative imagination, which is one specific, what he's now considering the sixth sense, is the direct link between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence. And that's where he says where people get hunches, where the ideas come. And this is actually where it gets kind of interesting. When I started reading this and I was thinking about the time frame in which it was written and who it was written by and who he had interviewed, I thought, it's going to be interesting because of course, it's not going to be about feelings. It's going to be a little bit more black and white, and this is what you do, and, who talks about feelings? Who talks about being psychic? And here is, this is, and I imagine him talking to Carnegie and Ford and Edison and, J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller, and I'm thinking, he's sitting here talking about being psychic. And, and you think of all this time, people are changing a little bit, but people would make fun of psychics. It was always the witch, the brouhaha, and here, and I remember it shocked me, for lack of a better word. I thought it was funny, whatever. This is the turn of the century, men that are strictly in business, and this is what they told them about the sixth sense. And the other thing I thought he would never address would be feelings. That's a female thing, right? Guys, they don't talk about feelings. And what does he say? He talks about imprinting what you want in your subconscious through the use of feelings. And I just thought, I don't want to say how ironic, but I just thought that's pretty funny. Those are two things I probably would never have expected. And here's okay, I'm going to say it. And he does. Calls it the sixth sense.
I think I wasn't surprised in this sense. I thought he slid really nicely into kind of sharing this. And by the way, let me put it at the end of the book because, go back to the beginning and reread that stuff and work through the processes. Yet he does share a bit of, the fact that when the mind is under the influence of extraordinary stimulation, things occur. And anything that arouses the emotions and causes the heart to beat more rapidly than normal brings that sixth sense into action. And, this can go into what everybody calls the sex chapter. This can go into anything. And I think, it can even go into people that use drugs or people that, smoke pot or something to kind of get a little high, or you have some alcohol to get in a different vibration, or people that meditate, or people that are trying to move themselves into a different vibration. And what occurs is that the mind has extraordinary stimulation. And I think when he talks about this and the knowledge that comes through, for me, it seems like a very practical presentation of it, rather than, a little bit hokey into just the mind and just the energy and just...
Well, to add to that, to add to what you just said, he breaks up the, creative imagination and the reasoning faculty. He talks about when you go into your imagination, it's based on either reason, which is your experiences, or you get creative. He breaks it into two pieces. And listen to what he says about the part that relates to experience. The reasoning faculty is often faulty because it is largely guided by one's accumulated experience. Not all knowledge which one accumulates through experience is accurate. Ideas received through the creative faculty are much more reliable for the reason that they come from sources more reliable than any which are available to the reasoning faculty of the mind. Which right there, he says, point blank, that your reasoning faculty is still possible to be aired. Yet the creative faculty, which is access to the infinite intelligence, has access to so much more.
And there's the hunches, and there's all the stuff that you can't opinionize, that you can't judge.
And you can't even explain.
Right.
Sometimes you can't even explain.
Right.
How did you get that?
Right.
I just got it.
Right.
I mean, maybe it's aliens planting it in your head.
I don't think he talks about
he
aliens
doesn't.
in here.
He doesn't. I'm just joking because that's what some people would say.
And it's funny because he, in the imagination chapter, he goes into saying that desire is only a thought, an impulse. I mean, after he talks about, make sure it's burning, it's a burning desire, he says it's only a thought, an impulse. It's nebulous, ephemeral, it's abstract and of no value until it has been transformed into its physical counterpart. And the synthetic imagination, which I thought that was kind of odd that he, created the two kinds of imagination, but it was interesting.
Well, I think it was to break it down to you. When you use your imagination, it's based on your experience. Is this going to work? Well, let me see. If I tried this, I know this happened. So he's saying that's part of your imagination. Then the other part is exactly what you said. You open up to...
Right, and I think
something you haven't tried.
It was helpful that he divided it, because then he could say that the synthetic imagination is the one used, to transform the impulse of desire into the actual money. But keep in mind that you may have circumstances that occur and you have to use your creative imagination. And it's a good way to give, super, it's like taking, a hero with a superpower, and then, it separates in two pieces, and you're like, ooh, great, now I got two pieces rather than just one that I can do it with.
Describe it. Instead of you just keep saying use your imagination, he's trying to separate the idea that when we think of our imagination, we base it on our past experiences and what we've known. When you go to solve a problem, right? You go into thinking about it. You go over, when you think of what have I used in the past, that's where research comes in, and that's when you look into other things. But that's
for me, it helps to have the visual, and I actually do think of a superhero, and I think about having that tool and that resource of the imagination, and then whatever their tool or their resource is, or their little thing that they have that they travel with, it breaks in two, but it's not a bad thing. It's like, ooh, now there's two parts they can utilize, and they're both as strong, and together they can go back together. And I thought it was very creative from that sense.
The other thing is that he talks about is, towards the end of the book, he talks a little bit more about issues that come up, and how to resolve fears, and looking at negative emotions and how do you override them so they don't last in your mind. And he talks about, the first thing that he says that I love is a state of mind is something that one assumes. It cannot be purchased. It must be created. And that is really I think a big part of the work that we do is your mind. I mean, if you can control your mind, you can control, control's a funny word, but you can control everything. And he said, and it's like funny, he says, if you must be careless with your possessions, let it be in connection with material things. Your mind is your spiritual estate. So once you understand all of this, a lot of the ending part, which I'm really not all that interested in talking about, is he lists all the fears that we have: fear of poverty, fear of death, fear of criticism, and then he also goes into the negative emotions that come into your mind. And the important thing I got from that, because I didn't go into it in too much depth, because Julie and I have done a lot of podcasts on them, and we wrote our book going through them. It's a huge, I think, in today's world, it is a huge process of going through your mindset, going through your fears, going through your beliefs, what people have told you. That in itself is a podcast that we could do for hours. And to say that it is important to do, if you don't do that work, then this work is all going to be sabotaged.
Right.
Because it's in the background. It's like you're watching a movie, but all in the background. They have all this stuff playing. And if you don't address it, you're always going to be wondering, why isn't this stuff working? And so I think it's important to say how important it is. But for me and you to talk about it would overwhelm this podcast. We would be going for another 8 hours. Suffice it to say, we did podcasts on our book, Energetic Invocations, a book of vibrational change, and the whole book is about clearing all of this. And I've said it in other podcasts, and I'll say it here, that all these ancient texts and all this empowering work will only go so far, and you're going to find a plateau that you can't seem to break through until you clear out the old stuff. There's lingering beliefs, thoughts, ideas that might be sabotaging some of these last minute things, and it's worth it to do it. And I'm going to say our book helped us. We created a process in our book similar to what Napoleon Hill created on the other side. It's almost like you read our book, you clear it, and then he goes in and he puts together his list of stuff to do.
Right. And there's also a chapter on the mystery of sex transmutation, and we're going to do another podcast. We have a Kybalion series where it connects the Kybalion chapter on gender with this. There is some, interesting material in it, but there is an interesting way of looking and having a conversation. So we're going to kind of save that for that. So head on over to the Kybalion podcast to check that out. He just talk about, to highlight one little thing, transmuting the desire from physical contact into other forms or actions. And there's so much more where that can be taken. And again, this book is really, people kind of take it and go, oh wow, it's about money. And, it's about getting more money. And it really is, like he says in the beginning, about what you really want, and to keep up that burning desire for it and to go full force in that direction. And I think there's a little section in The Power of the Mastermind where he talks at the very end of one of the chapters, and he talks about money specifically. And I thought it was interesting because he gives some attributes that you can sense it in a little bit of a different way. He says money is shy and elusive. It must be wooed and won by methods not unlike those used by a determined lover in pursuit of the girl of his choice. And coincidental as it is, the power used in the wooing of money is not greatly different from that used in wooing a maiden. And that relates a lot to, the transmutation chapter on the mystery of it, of sex transmutation. Yet, in the sense of looking at money with that energy and vibration, it kind of takes on a different feel because, like I said before, in different podcasts, we've talked about money and the expression of kind of how people relate to it. And I think that brings out what he talks about, brings out an interesting point of interesting attributes to think differently about money.
Well, and that money could be a metaphor for whatever your goal or dreams are.
Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.